Hey Power Watts riders, Coach Mark here with Power Watts home workout number 7, the Staminator. We're going to be getting started in a little bit less than a minute, so make sure that you guys go on to my report, get all the files that you guys need loaded up so that you're ready to follow along with the workout. So go get that done now, and if you're not ready, put it on pause and wait till there's just a couple seconds before it starts to restart. So I'll give you a moment to get set up. Alright guys, so we're going in 10 seconds. Hopefully you got everything loaded up and ready to go on your trainer. Alright folks, so 3, 2, 1, and we are underway with Power Watts home workout number 7, the Staminator. So we're just going to be starting off our warm-up riding easy at 50% or so for the first 4 minutes. And then we're going to slowly inch up the watts over the course of our warm-up. And we're going to play quite a bit with the cadence in the warm-up. We've included some cadence pyramids where we're going to be escalating up the cadence, up and up and up. Then we're going to escalate the cadence down and down and down. And then we're going to escalate it back up and up and up again. That way we cover all the bases. We make sure that we warm up the body and that we warm up the different leg speeds, whether it be grinding or whether it be pedaling a little bit faster. All right, guys, so let's take a look at what we're going to be doing today. In our last few workouts, especially our last 2 workouts, Rep It Out was workout number 6 and Lucky Sevens was workout number 5. Both those workouts had a highly anaerobic component to it. In workout number 6, you guys did 10 times 30 seconds, progressively increasing the power. And then in workout number 5, Lucky Sevens, you guys did the Lucky Sevens drill 3 times, which was just a quick burst acceleration for 7 seconds to really hit those high-end powers in a repeated way. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a step back from all that anaerobic work, and we're going to be developing your endurance. We're going to be developing your stamina. So in order to do that, we're going to be doing slightly longer efforts today with very short recoveries in between, but at lower power targets. So this is a great way to develop your longer term endurance. I'm sure many of you guys are following the Power Watts program to get ready for longer distance outdoor rides. So we want to make sure that we tackle a lot of those power outputs that you're going to be using on those longer rides. So let's take a bit of a closer look at what we're going to do point by point. So if you guys take a look in the workout profile right below here, our first drills, we have 4 times 4 minutes. The 4-minute drills, the first 2 average out to 85% and the second 2 average out to 90%. Now if we take a look at that first one, we can see that there is some variability in the power. And if you guys look, the purple line in the workout profile, that indicates the cadence. And the cadence is going to be constant. So what we're going to do in that first one is we're going to vary the power, but we're going to keep the cadence the same. And we're going to see how that feels. And then in the second drill, we're going to keep the power the same. You guys can see the power is flat, but the purple RPM line, we can see it goes up and then down and then up and then down. So in that second drill, we're going to keep the power constant and we're going to vary the cadence. And that's going to allow you guys to contrast the difference in feeling between a variable power and steady cadence or variable cadence and steady power. You guys might find both of them to be equal in difficulty. Maybe some of you might find it a little bit harder to hold the steady cadence, or you might find it a little bit harder to hold the variable cadence. So we'll be able to contrast that, and we'll learn what that tells us about you as a cyclist. And we're going to follow a similar pattern for the last 2 4-minute drills, where the third one we have that steady cadence again with variable power, and the last one we have steady power with variable cadence. So it's going to give you guys 2 opportunities to contrast the difference between those 2 riding styles. All right, so let's just bring our attention to what we're doing right now in the warm-up. Next up, we have 1 minute at 60% at 90 RPM. But at 60%, we're actually going to be there for 3 minutes. You can see that in the report card. So let's go up to 60% now. Let's go to 90 RPM. And we're going to be at 60% for 3 minutes. And each minute, we're going to bring the RPM up bit by bit. So we're just going to start to work that higher cadence, but we're still going to keep the power low. We're still going to keep the power pretty comfortable here. So everyone, get to that 60%, go to about 90 RPM. Then we're going to go to 100 RPM. Then we're going to go to 110. After we do 110, then we're going to drop it down to 85 RPM, and we're going to work those RPMs down. So the second portion, we're going to be doing lower and lower RPM. So those of you guys that don't like the high RPM, let's get this done early in the warm-up just to get you guys ready. Hitting these high RPMs will be really helpful so that the RPMs that we use in that first drill, the 4 times 4 minute drill, you guys will be prepared for that. So let's get ready to go to 100 on the RPM. Okay, so 3, 2, 1, and adjust the gears to try to get close to 100 RPM. If you can't get to exactly 100 RPM, that's okay. So let's say, try to go between 95 and 105 in terms of the cadence, and nice and steady at that power at around 60%. So we know what our first drill is, 4 times 4 minutes. That second drill that you guys see, we're going to be simulating a series of 5 climbs. Each climb gets slightly longer, gets slightly more intense. And in between the climbs, you guys are going to be riding at an active recovery aerobic power of 70% and 100 RPM, like you're doing now, to practice spinning your legs between the simulated climbs. So we're going to simulate the climbs by using a lower cadence. And those of you guys that can adjust the resistance on your trainers, I'm going to encourage you to put more resistance when we get to that drill. All right, so we're already to our next step here. So 60%, 110 on the RPM. So now this might be getting high for many of you. So let's go back to our high RPM tricks. So you can slide forward a little bit on the saddle. You can take your toes and you can just dip them down a little bit, practicing kicking over top of the pedal stroke or sweeping through the bottom of the pedal stroke. You can imagine that anchor between your hips and the saddle like it's a magnet pulling your hips down into the saddle so that there's no bouncing. And to facilitate that, you could think about tucking your bum a little bit like a scared dog. The act of tucking your bum a little bit really reinforces that connection between the saddle and between your hips. So work that, guys, for another 20 seconds. You might try to use all those tricks, or you might find maybe one of those tricks works really well for you. Play around with it here for another 10 seconds. Then we're going to bring the power up a bit. We're going to go to 70% on the watts. So just a 10% increase, but we're going to go down to 85 RPM. All right, guys, so let's start hitting those gears. Get into harder gears. Ease those watts up to 70%. Bring that cadence down to 85 on the RPM. So fantastic. So hopefully you guys felt those high RPM legs active. I'm going to be asking you guys to hold more or less a steady 90 RPM for 2 of those 4-minute drills. And one of the beauties of holding an RPM like 110 RPM is when you go back to riding at 90 RPM, it's going to feel like you're pedaling slow. Especially for those of you guys that naturally pedal at 80 RPM, for example, you're going to find 90 RPM normally to feel fast. But if you practice riding at 110 RPM, then when you go down to 90, 90 is going to feel a little bit slower. So if your body, a gear harder, guys, 2 gears harder, let's go down to 75 on the RPM. So your body will adapt to the stimulus that you give it, say 110 on the RPM. And then when you go down to 90, even though it's still high for you, it's going to feel lower than the 110, so it'll feel a little bit easier. Similarly, for the low cadence, we're going really low now, 75, then we're going to go to 65. So if you don't like to pedal slow, after you ride at, say, 65 or 75 RPM, if I ask you to go to 80, 80 is going to feel like you're pedaling fast. So it's a good way. If we work those extremes, and when you guys get into the middle, you'll feel a little bit more comfortable. So 10 more seconds, guys. Then the next 50 seconds is at 65 RPM. Now, I want you guys to stay seated here. That'll be pretty challenging for some of you guys. So let's stay sitting, 70%, 65 on the RPM. So another gear or 2 harder, okay? And now really either get that full extension of your leg by sliding back on the saddle a little bit, or you could slide forward on the saddle a little bit and really try to get your body weight down into the pedals at 65 RPM. That way your body weight will assist in generating the force, and you don't only need to use your muscles. Okay guys, so we got 20 more seconds at 65 on the RPM. Real grind here, working the strength, getting you guys ready for what's coming later, especially the hill climbing that we're going to be doing later. And next up, we're going to bring the power up to 80%, and we're going to go to 90 RPM. So you're going to have to go a couple gears easier. So get ready guys, 3, 2, 1, and 80%, 90 on the RPM. And because you've been riding at 65 RPM, 90 might feel a bit harder than it did earlier in the workout when we began the warm-up, or the second step in the warm-up. And that might be the case because you were grinding for a bit. So just try to give yourself an opportunity to reestablish that rhythm at 90. Then we're going to go to 85%, 100 RPM, and then 90%, 110 RPM. And then we are done the warm-up, guys. So each of these steps is only 40 seconds. So we're already at the end of the 90 RPM step. So let's go to 85%, 100 on the RPM. So here we go. You might start to implement some of your high RPM tricks. If you don't feel like you need to change positions at all because you're comfortable at 100 RPM, fantastic. That's good. Keep that up, and you might feel that need to adjust your position when we get to 110. All right, guys, so 20 seconds. Then we got one effort left at 90%, 110 RPM, and hopefully this will set the rhythm. This will ingrain that feeling of 110 RPM, so anything less than 110 will feel a little bit easier when we start our first drill. All right, guys, so start to adjust those gears, 1 or 2 gears easier here, 90%, 110 on the RPM. And if anyone wants to challenge themselves just to get those faster pedaling legs going, when there's 20 seconds left, 15 seconds left, feel free to go another gear easier to spin the legs even faster. But make sure that you stay anchored to the saddle and that you're applying a force to those pedals throughout the entire range of motion of the pedal stroke. So we got 15 seconds left. Then we got a 2.5 minute recovery period after our warm-up. So good spinning of the legs here, guys. So we're almost there. 3, 2, 1, and let's bring it down. 2.5 minutes recovery. All right, so fantastic warm-up. We didn't go super high in terms of the power. We only built it up to about 90%, but that leg speed at the end definitely solicited a lot of your muscle fibers to get you guys ready for what's coming. Great. So I mentioned that the first drill is 4 times 4 minutes, and we're going to be checking the difference in feel between variable power, steady cadence, and variable cadence, steady power. The second drill is 5 climbs, 5 simulated climbs. So we're going to be going at low cadence. Each climb gets a little bit longer and a little bit more intense. And in between the climbs, we're going to be spinning the legs at 70% and about 100 RPM to practice flip-flopping between the high and the low cadence. And then the final drill, I didn't tell you guys about it yet. That last drill, we're going to be riding steady 90%, so just like we just did for the last 40 seconds of our warm-up, and we're going to be practicing going at a low cadence, going at a high cadence, and going at a cadence of your choice. But in all 3 of those conditions, the final portion of that drill, I'm going to ask you to look away from the screen so that you're not going to see your power output, and you're going to have to ride by feel. We do this a lot in class in Power Watts. Without access to your Power Watt Center, it's not easy to do it at home. You won't be able to hide your screen, but you will be able to close your eyes, or you will be able to look away from the screen for the 30 seconds or the 1 minute period, and then look up right before the effort's over to see if your average watts is close to where you wanted it to be. So that's a great exercise to internalize the feeling of effort. Keep in mind that we're going to be doing that at the end of the workout. If you want to practice looking away periodically from the screen in our first 2 drills, go ahead and then you'll be ready to practice that in our final drill. Okay guys, so first drill, 4 minutes. The power is going to change every minute, but the cadence is always going to be 85 to 95. I'd encourage you to try to stay as close to 90 as you can. We don't try to avoid swinging, say, from 95 RPM to 85 RPM. That's a 10 RPM change. So find somewhere in that range, settle into it, and then try to stay as close to it as you can. So let's go to 80%. Try to get as close to 90 RPM as you can. So let's bring it up to 80%. And you might end up at 86 RPM, you might end up at 92, whatever it is. Your goal will then be to try to hold that RPM throughout the remainder of the drill. And since the power targets change, you are going to have to go one gear easier, one gear harder, but you want to try to keep that cadence as steady as you can. So we're at 80%. It's a really good endurance development power like 80%. Then we're going to bring it up to 90% in just a moment. So at 90%, that's a 10% increase. So that's going to definitely require a gearing adjustment. But before you switch your gears, just bring the watts up, see what kind of RPM change that results in, and then you choose if you need one gear harder or 2 gears harder. If you see your RPMs go up by 5, you go 1 gear harder. If they go up by 10, you might have to go 2 gears harder. So let's keep the power on target here. So let's go up to 90%. Let's not overshoot the watts here. We're working on control. And now you've had a moment to get to the power. Now choose what kind of gearing adjustment you have to make, trying to stay as close as you can to the RPM that you used in the first minute of this drill. Great. So now you have the same RPM but a different power output. Do you notice the difference of 80 to 90%? Maybe not, because we're pretty early in the workout, or maybe you felt a big increase in difficulty because you're not used to pedaling at a higher cadence like 90 RPM for several minutes in a row. And if that's the case, that's okay. This is a great exercise to improve that ability to hold those higher cadences or moderate cadences. Most people would consider 90 RPM a moderate cadence. So we got 10 more seconds here. Then we're going to go down to 75%. So this is almost like a period of active recovery. Not quite, but almost like active recovery. And now you'll have to go into easier gears. So let that power come down. The cadence will go down a little bit. And now go into easier gears to hold that 85 to 95 range. Or try to hold the same RPM that you did on the previous minute. So great work here, guys. If any of you want to practice looking away from the screen at the 75%, it's a good time to do it. If you overshoot it a little bit, which tends to happen when people look away from the screen, overshooting it at 75% is not a big deal. When we go to 95% in just a moment, if you consistently overshoot the 95%, then you're going to start burning matches and you might accumulate fatigue for the drills that follow at a faster rate than the workout anticipates. Okay, so hopefully everyone's at that 75%, pretty close to that cadence of steady cadence that you used for the first 2 minutes. And now we're going to go to our last minute. We're going to be going up by 20% watts. So let's bring those watts up, see what happens to the cadence, and then make the gearing adjustments that you guys need to be as steady as you can on those RPM. And do your best, guys. This is endurance development. Don't go and find a way to make it feel harder than necessary. Do your best to focus on your breathing, staying relaxed in the face, neck, shoulders, and elbows, being efficient with your pedaling mechanics, so not bouncing around on the seat, so that it feels as comfortable as possible. When we develop endurance, the goal is to hit those power targets, trying to make it feel as comfortable as possible. So let's keep it up here, guys, for another 20 seconds, and then we have a 1-minute recovery. Just give yourself, or think about what your perceived exertion score is for this first 4-minute drill, and then we'll be able to compare it to the second one, because the second one, remember, the power is going to be steady, but the RPMs are going to change. So 5 more seconds. So what's your RPE score? Think about it in your head. All right, and 1-minute recovery. Now, on the recovery, just keep the legs spinning. Don't stop completely here. It's not like an anaerobic power drill where you might have to stop completely for recovery in between. Keep a good momentum, but bring those watts down so that you really recover. All right, great. So you have your RPE score for that first 4 minutes. Now let's go for the next 4-minute drill. Now this time, it's 85% all the way. The drill we just finished had an average power of 85%. So the overall effort is roughly the same. But now we're going to be bouncing around on the RPMs. So the first one, 80 to 90. The second one, 90 to 100. Then we're going to go way down, 70 to 80. Try to do it sitting as much as you can. And then the last one, we're going to go way up, 100 to 110. So we'll see how your level of effort varies with the cadence at this power of 85%. So let's get started, guys. So bring those watts up to 85%. Give yourself a good 10 seconds to settle in at 85%, maybe even 15 seconds, and then find the gear that you need. As you build up momentum in the first 10, 15, 20 seconds of a drill, your speed gradually increases, and as your speed goes up, you'll have to go into harder gears to keep your RPM within that target window. So fantastic. You guys have had quite a bit, almost 30 seconds here at 85%, so you got your gears. And now the next one, we're going from 80 to 90 RPM to 90 to 100 RPM. So that, we're looking 2 gears easier, maybe 3 gears easier if you want to go from 80 all the way up to 95 or 100 on the RPM. Okay, and this whole time, this whole process, keep that power at exactly 85%. Most of you will probably find it a little bit harder to be at 90 to 100 RPM. Hopefully, so get ready, guys. 3, 2, 1, and let's go. 90 to 100 RPM. But if you say to yourself, 80 to 90 RPM, 90 to 100 RPM, they feel about the same, that's great. Because over time, if you could decrease the discrepancy between the difficulty of a higher cadence and a lower cadence, that's a good sign that you're finding the efficient pedaling mechanics at the lower RPM and at the higher RPM. Great, so hopefully everyone's right around 95, 96, 97 on the RPM. And we got another 30 seconds to go before we go way down in the cadence. So we're looking at a big cadence drop coming up next. About 20 or so on the RPM we're going to go down. 20 or so RPM is 4 to 5 gears harder, probably 4 gears harder, depending on where you guys are in your cassette. Okay, so we got 10 more seconds. As you guys go into the harder gears, watch your power output. Let's keep it at 85%. We don't want it to spike or dip. Okay, so gradually make those gearing adjustments. Hold that power. Boom, harder gear, harder gear, harder gear, until you settle in at 75 RPM or so, plus or minus. All right, now if you got to stand up for a second just to reposition, no problem, but do your best to stay sitting here throughout this entire minute. And then our final minute, we're going to be going up to between 100 and 110 on the RPM. So this is a great opportunity to practice a positional change. So right now you've settled in to the position at lower cadence that works best for you. Now we're about to go to the higher cadence. So for the higher cadence, change your position on the saddle. Change the position of your feet. Change the way that you apply force to the pedals to be a little bit more circular, the top and the bottom of the pedal stroke, to get to that cadence while holding the power output. So this is a great opportunity, guys. Okay, so really think about that. We're going to go to 100 to 110 RPM in 3, 2, 1, and let's do it, guys. So 100 to 110. After doing such a low RPM, this is probably going to feel a little bit higher. Well, it's definitely going to feel a little bit higher, but it might be a little bit more difficult than you anticipate if you settled into the low cadence. Okay, good. So hopefully you guys have settled in. You found that pedaling position that works best for you. And now just try to think back while you're riding, while you're doing it, while you have maybe a little bit of discomfort accumulating here. What's the RPE score of this one? Is it a bit higher than the last one? Is it about the same as the last one? Or is it a bit lower than the last one? Okay, so you got another 20 seconds or so to do this. So think about that in your head, and then we'll have a brief discussion about it during the 1-minute recovery period. Okay, so 10 more seconds, guys. Good quality pedaling. Use the top, use the bottom of the pedal stroke. Keep the hips firmly down on the saddle. So 3, 2, 1, and there we go. Let's back it off, guys. So 1 minute of recovery. So great stuff, guys. So say if you found that second drill a little bit easier than the first drill, that's a great sign that you have good pedaling mechanics at low and at high cadence. You figured out the tactics that you need to use in order to successfully pedal faster and successfully pedal slower. If you found that second drill a little bit higher because we had to go to the 90 and 110, 90, 100, 110 on the RPM, that just means that you haven't quite found that pedaling technique at the higher cadence yet. The higher cadence for many of you will always be a little bit harder. But once you find that technique that works best for you and you practice it, then the discrepancy will be a little bit less. All right, guys, so now we're going to try to hold a steady 90 RPM, but the power is going to vary. This drill a little bit harder than the previous two because it averages out to 90%. So first up, 80% and 90 RPM. So let's go 80%, 90 RPM. Then we're going to bump up to 100%. So that's a threshold power. 1 minute at 100% is kind of like burning a match, if you want to use the match analogy. It's also like draining, say, about 5% of your battery, for those of you that are familiar with the battery when we use it at power watts. And then after that, we come back to an endurance power of 85%, and then we go up to 95%. 95% is right at that cusp of where you start to utilize a little bit more your anaerobic system, or start to burn a little bit more energy or drain the battery. Okay, so right now we're at 80%, 90 RPM, nice and steady. So next up, we're going to go to 100%, so you got to go up by 20% watts while keeping your cadence in this same range. Aim to be as close to 90 as you can. So get ready, guys. We are going up in 3, 2, 1, and 100%. 85 to 95 on the RPM. As close to 90 as you can, or as close to the same cadence as you did in the previous minute. So fantastic. So find that rhythm. Even though the cadence is staying about the same, it doesn't mean that you can't try slight adjustments to your body position. For example, something as simple as switching from your hands being on the bar tops to your hands being on the hoods to your hands being in the drops will change the angle of your upper body. And the change in angle of your torso will change the way you use the musculature in your legs. So you can experiment without necessarily making a big positional change in your legs. You can make a positional change in your upper body and feel the difference in your legs. So play around with that aspect too if you haven't played around with that yet. Okay, guys, so now we're going to go down to 85%. So let's ease it down by 15%. So that minute that you just did is roughly equivalent to burning a match. We're burning about 5% of your battery. So just reflect on what that feels like in our predominantly endurance development workout today. On long rides, you want to keep efforts like that under control to make sure that you don't burn your matches or drain your battery early in a long ride. Unless you have to get over a really steep hill, but you don't want to waste it for nothing. All right, guys, so we're at 85%, 90 roughly on the RPM. 85% is a great endurance development power, and then we're going to be popping it up to 95%. So you guys could try again a perhaps positional change in your upper body, switching your hand grip on the handlebars, changing the angle of your torso, and see how that affects the level of effort. So 3, 2, 1, and let's go up to 95%. If you lean forward a little bit more, your body weight will get into those pedals. As long as you don't start to grip really hard the handlebars, we want the weight to go into the pedals as much as possible. Okay, so this is the last minute. This drill as a whole, this 4 minute as a whole, had a slightly higher average watts than the last two. So think about your RP score for this one. It's probably a smidge higher than the previous two, or maybe it's about the same. And then we're going to compare that to the RP score on our fourth one. So nice and smooth here, guys, for the last 25 seconds. And then we get a 1 minute recovery period. So great pedaling mechanics so far, guys. Think about where you're feeling it in your legs. Become aware of how the body position you're in affects the part of your leg that you feel doing the majority of the work. So 3, 2, 1, and back it off. Great stuff, guys. So I mentioned in the last 4 minutes quite a bit about the feeling in your legs. I didn't quite talk about the feeling of your breath. But in this next one, what happens to some people is when they go to those higher cadence, even though they might be pedaling in an effective way, they tend to breathe faster because they're pedaling faster. So that's a habit that you guys want to try to get out of. I mean, it makes sense at really high anaerobic powers, you're going to start to breathe faster because the power output's really high. But at these power outputs, especially a steady power output like 90%, when we go from the lower cadence to the higher cadence, you don't want to start to increase your breathing rate. the level of effort at 90% stays about the same. It's just the pedaling of the legs that changes. So you want to keep that breathing rate as similar as you can at the lower cadence and the higher cadence. Okay, so we're going to start really low on the cadence on this one, guys. So let's go to 90% around 75 RPM. 90% around 75 RPM. See where you settle in terms of the body position. You know, you might be further back on the saddle, really extending the leg. You might be further forward on the saddle, falling into the pedals. Either one is good, or you might do something different. Another little trick, when the cadence is a little bit lower, is you can transfer the pressure from the inside of the foot a little bit more to the outside of the foot and see how that feels. Or if you're not naturally on the outside of the foot, you could transfer the pressure to the inside of the foot, see how that feels. Okay, and then we're going to be switching, big increase in RPM. Okay, so about a increase of 30 RPM here. So multiple gears easier, 4 or 5 gears easier. When you go into the easier gears, let's not let the power drop. Let's keep the power at 90%. Let's make a body position adjustment, but let's keep the breathing rhythm the same. Slow, controlled on the breathing. Okay, so here we go, guys. Let's get into those easier gears. Adjust the cadence, adjust the body position, maybe adjust the pedaling mechanics to apply a bit more force over the top and a bit more force through the bottom until you find what works for you. But this whole time, nice, smooth, and steady breathing rhythm. Okay, so practice not breathing faster just because you're pedaling faster. So excellent work here, guys. Now after this one, we're going to go back to a lower cadence, 80 to 90 RPM. So definitely not as low as the first one. And the cadence is going to feel nice and low though, again, because that effect, you're at a high cadence now. So when you go down to 85, 85 is going to feel like you're pedaling slower than usual, which some of you might like and some of you might not like, depending on your level of fatigue. So let's keep holding this 90%. Then we're going to go to 80 to 90 RPM. So 20 RPM lower, roughly. So 3, 2, 1. Keep the power the same. 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 gears harder, depending on what your cadence was. Okay, excellent. So we have 2 minutes, a bit less than 2 minutes left here at 90%. So I want you guys, once you've settled in, to start to prepare for the final drill by looking away from the screen for a period of 10 or 15 or 20 seconds. Okay, maybe when we get to 30 seconds, look away from the screen for 15 seconds. Okay, so focus on that feeling of the cadence. Now look away from the screen for a sec here and keep your cadence the same. Just think about your RPM. If you keep the same RPM, you're going to keep the same power output. Do a couple more seconds, guys. Don't look yet. Okay, and now look back up at the screen. Did your power go up? Did your cadence go up? Did it go down, or did it stay about the same? We're going to be challenging you guys to do this later on in the workout. Now that was at lower cadence. Now we're going to practice it at a slightly higher cadence. So let's go 90 to 100 on the RPM, guys. So 1 or 2 gears easier. Hold that steady 90%. Give yourself a good 30 seconds to find that rhythm. And then we're going to look away from the screen for 15 seconds again as a prep exercise for our final drill. Okay, so we got still another 10-15 seconds to find that rhythm. Find the position on the bike. Find the body lean. Find that breathing rhythm that's comfortable. Okay, internalize the feeling of this. And now look away from the screen. So look away. I'll tell you when to look back. Focus on the feeling of cadence. And then when you guys look back up at the screen, look at your power, look at your cadence. So 5 more seconds. Okay, and now everyone look up at the screen. Keep riding. Look up at the screen. Did your power go up? Did it go down? Did your cadence stay the same? Okay, so, and now that'll help you guys set the table for our final drill. So 3, 2, 1, and take a little break. Well done, guys. So we got the 4 times 4 minutes at our endurance development powers done. Hopefully you guys found a way to make it feel as comfortable as possible. And just think back to these last 2 exercises, the comparison of steady cadence, variable power, to steady power, variable cadence. Which one was easier? Which one was harder? And if you guys find it more challenging to vary the cadence, you have to work a little bit more on your pedaling technique. And if you find it hard to hold that steady cadence because you want to vary your cadence, for example, you prefer the varied cadence, then at the similar cadence, say when you're holding the 90 RPM, you'll have to practice adjusting your body positions. Like I had mentioned earlier, you can change your hand positions, you can slide on the saddle, you can change your upper body tilt. Changing those body positions will change the feeling of the effort, will change the musculature that's working without having to change the cadence. So if you found the steady cadence more challenging, learn to play around a little bit more with your body positions. And if you found the variable cadence more challenging, experiment, keep working on your techniques at the high cadence and the low cadence. You can even go back to home workout number 1, RPM Mania, and review all the techniques that were introduced in that particular workout to refine your higher pedaling skills and your lower pedaling skills. All right, so well done, guys. So next up, we have 5 simulated climbs, and the first one is 1 minute, and then they each get 15 seconds longer until the last one's 2 minutes. So the first one's at 90%, and then each one of them is at a 5% higher until the last one's at 110%. So for this, if you guys have access to a setting where you can increase the resistance on your trainer, whether it just be turning a knob or adjusting the grade, say to put yourself on a 3 or 4% grade for the uphill portions here, for the simulated hills, do so now. If you don't have access to that, or you can't do that right now, no problem. Just keep the cadence a little bit lower. The cadence target is 60 to 80 to try to work the mechanics similar to climbing a hill. Okay, so we're going in 10 seconds, so put that resistance on if you can. If you can't, no problem. Let's just go 60 to 80 on the RPM. So here we go, guys. 90%, 60 to 80 on the RPM. Those of you that like to stand up, especially those of you that like to stand up climbing, go for it now. Stand up as much as you want on these particular exercises, especially if you're naturally inclined to stand up when you're climbing hills outside. But the power outputs aren't massive here at this point. 90%, 95%. You don't want to be hammering into those pedals when you guys stand up. You want to stand up more subtly, just working on that weight transfer to keep that power at 90%. Okay, so great stuff, guys. So we got this for another 25 seconds. Then there's a 15-second break. The break is there just for those of you guys to quickly adjust your resistance down. If you've increased the resistance or put a grade, get rid of it. And then we're going to do 45 seconds at 70%. And I want you guys to try to pedal at actually a high RPM, like 100 RPM. Okay, so 3, 2, 1, and let's go down. So just 15 seconds here. Keep a bit of momentum. Don't stop completely. Adjust the resistance if you've increased it. So now, 45 seconds, 70%. It says 90 RPM on screen here. I want you to do 100 RPM. Okay, so let's do 100 on the RPM. So working, spinning the legs. So 70%, it's kind of like the high end of an active recovery power here. And 100 RPM to work the complete opposite of what we just did, pretending to climb that hill at the lower RPM. Okay, so get those legs spinning here, guys, at around 100 on the RPM. Practice trying to stay loose in the musculature of your legs. Okay, so don't tighten up the legs. We're trying to spin the legs, so loosen it up here. So just follow along with the pedaling motion, applying pressure to the pedals, but without staying very tense in the legs, without staying very tense in the upper body. Everything nice and loose. Okay, so now we've got a 15-second little recovery. So crank up the tension a bit if you have access to that. So now this one, 1 minute, 15 seconds, 95%, 60 to 80 again on the RPM. Okay, so here we go, guys. Simulated hill number 2. So 95%. So 95%. We've experienced that a couple times already today. This is that cusp where you guys start to dip a little bit more into that anaerobic system and start to utilize or drain your battery, but just a tiny bit. But the subsequent 3 climbs that follow are going to force you guys to burn matches and drain the battery at a bit of a higher rate. So find that rhythm now at 95%. That makes it feel as comfortable as you can, knowing that our climbs are going to be getting a little bit tougher. Okay, so good riding, guys. If anyone's out of the saddle, fantastic. Keep it up. Any of you guys that really dislike standing up on climbs, I would encourage you, not necessarily on this one, but on one of the 3 that are coming up, to get out of the saddle for a period of 15, 20, 30 seconds just to practice switching up the muscles, switching up the body position, changing the tension on the upper body and on the back when you get up out of the saddle. It's good to get used to doing that periodically. Okay, so we got 10 more seconds here. Then we go down to a recovery, but don't bring your watts too low here. Just keep a bit of rhythm. Maybe go to 40, 50, 60%. If you feel good, go right to 70% if you want. Okay, adjust that tension down. And now 70%, 100 on the RPM. Okay, and we're going for that in 3, 2, 1, and here we go. So 70%, 100 on the RPM, working, spinning those legs at this slightly lower power. So really play around with your body position. You know, if you're climbing in a very upright posture, maybe try leaning over a little bit more at the 100 RPM here. If you're climbing really bent over, well then sit a little bit more upright. If you're on the back of the saddle climbing, go to the front of the saddle for the higher cadence here. Play with all those options that you have to really change the muscles that are working. So we got another 10 seconds. Ask yourself, is this for morning recovery? Is this making it harder than necessary because of the 100 RPM? Maybe. Okay, so let's back it off for 15 seconds. But it is a valuable skill to practice, coming off a low RPM section and getting those RPMs up right away. So next climb, minute and a half, 100%. Okay, so increase that tension if you can. And here we go. 100%, 60 to 80 still on the RPM. If you haven't gotten out of the saddle yet, at some point in this minute and a half, I want you up out of the saddle for 15, 20, 30 seconds, just changing things up. If you haven't sat down yet, if you stood all the way for the first two, make sure you sit down at some point here. And when you guys are sitting down, if you like to stand, you could sit down further forward on the saddle to kind of simulate getting your body weight into the pedals, like when you guys are standing up. Okay, so the effort level is getting a little bit higher now that we're at 100%. And I just want everyone to take a brief moment, regardless what position you're in. Do a quick spot check on your body. Relax the face, neck, shoulders, elbows. Don't put too much tension on the hands. Unless you're standing, you got to squeeze a little bit harder. Focus on nice, smooth breathing, full exhalation. Okay, so a nice relaxed demeanor while we're doing our endurance power development here. This is a little bit more than endurance because we are burning some matches here. We are draining the battery a bit, but you want to stay relaxed through it. So we got another 20 seconds like this, guys. So nice and smooth. Find the way that makes it feel as comfortable as you can. And then we got our little recovery. So 10 seconds. All right, guys. So let's back it off. 3, 2, 1. Decrease any tension or adjust that hill grade down if you can. And now get the gears ready. It says on screen here, it says 90 RPM, but I want you guys to do 100. So 3, 2, 1, let's go to 100 RPM. So 70%, 100 on the RPM. Let's get those legs spinning here. And just think back to the muscles that you felt when you were climbing the minute and a half climb a moment ago. We want you to feel something different. We want you to feel different muscles, or maybe you won't feel your muscles at all because you've learned to loosen them up as you go at this higher cadence and lower power to spin the legs and promote different muscle groups working, or relaxation of the climbing muscles at least. Okay, so we got 10 more seconds like this, guys. And then we have our climb number 4. Okay, so let's keep the cadence high for another 3, 2, 1, and bring it down 15 seconds. So crank up the tension, guys. So now it's 1 minute, 45 seconds at 105%. So we're definitely outside of the realm of endurance development here. So 3, 2, 1, and here we go. Minute 45 seconds, 105%. This would be considered threshold development. If you think back to workout number 4, if you did an alternative approach, that was all about threshold development, and you guys were working at 105% frequently in that workout. So the level of effort's definitely going to go up here. We want to keep that cadence low, 60 to 80 in the RPM, to simulate those demands of the extra resistance. And if you're able to put that extra resistance on, great. Okay, so let's keep this up, guys. And now you can start to utilize some of those small positional adjustments. For example, if the pressure right now is behind your big toe towards the center of your foot, just make that transfer to put the pressure behind the baby toe. Okay, and see how that feels with the pressure behind the baby toe. The knees might come out a little bit, but don't push the knees out purposely. Just change the pressure underneath the feet and push there for a bit. See how that feels. Then maybe slide back on the saddle just a smidge. See how that feels. Maybe switch from the hoods to the bar tops and see how that feels. Or if you're already there, switch from the bar tops to the hoods. Okay, transfer the foot pressure as need be. Experiment with the technique. I'm sure the level of effort is increasing. We got 20 seconds left on this climb. So this is our second to last climbing effort today. So nice and smooth all the way to the end. We have a short 15-second recovery. Nobody stop pedaling though, because you got to get ready to go to that 100 RPM. So 3, 2, 1. Okay, so let's back it off. You got 15 seconds to recover. Now we're about to do 70%, 100 RPM for the last time. So get your gears ready. Change your body position. Okay, change your pedaling mechanics. 3, 2, 1. 70% and 100 on the RPM. I'm just going to bring your attention while you're doing this. The power output is a little bit lower. So hopefully no one started to breathe faster just because you're pedaling faster. Focus on the breathing. Bring that breathing back in check even though you're pedaling faster. Okay, so good stuff, guys. Think about that breathing rhythm. And this is going to hopefully set you up for a really good final climb. Our final climb, a little bit tougher now. It's going to be 2 minutes, 110%. And that's going to really dip a little bit into the anaerobic system. Okay, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So 15 seconds, bring it down. So crank up the resistance an extra notch. Put on a 3 or 4 or 5% uphill if you can. And now last one, so it's a full 2-minute effort at 110%. So 3, 2, 1, and here we go. So this is by far the biggest effort of the day. It is longer than any of the other ones, and it's at a higher power than the other ones. So let's see what you guys can do to make it happen. And you might fluctuate. You might sit for a bit at 80 RPM, and then stand for a bit at 65 RPM, and then sit for a bit at 80 RPM. Or you might sit at 80 RPM, and then sit at 70, and then go back to 80. Just because it's 2 minutes of continuous effort, you don't have to do the same thing for 2 minutes. Play around with it. Like we were playing around in that first 4 times 4 minute drill, changing cadence, for example, even though the power output was the same. It's a little bit harder now, though, that we're up at 110%. So you guys are looking good. The effort level's nice and high. You might be tensing up a little bit, which is understandable. Try to relieve that tension, but if you can't, it's okay. Okay, so we got 1 minute to go on our last climb. Just a reminder, what's coming after this is we're going to practice the feeling at 90%. We're not doing a super demanding drill. So if you have to dig deep to get this 2 minutes done, that's okay. And if you're feeling good and you want to go a little bit over the 110, absolutely. Don't completely spend yourself, but give it a good finish to this climb here. So we're looking good, guys. We're coming up on the final 30 seconds. If you found what's working well, keep it up. But you might have to change something for the last 30 seconds. You might pop it a gear easier, try to go up to 80 RPM, or you might get out of the saddle, or you might do something that's more subtle, like transferring the pressure underneath your feet. All very useful techniques. So we're almost there, guys. Last 15 seconds. And when there's 10 seconds to go, everyone increase your power. Okay, increase your power now. And when you hear the beep, just increase it again a little bit more to resist that urge to slow down early. So keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, and that is it. All right, guys. So fantastic work. So 2 minutes, 110%. Think about how difficult that was in terms of an RPE score. I mean, it's definitely nowhere near as difficult as maybe some of those anaerobic powers we've done in the last few workouts, but it's definitely much higher in difficulty than some of the stuff that we've done earlier today. And this workout was kind of like a build up towards that 2 minute climb. That's often what happens outdoors. You guys have to ride for an extended period of time, and then you come upon the first climb of the day. You want to make sure that you control your power outputs until you get to that first climb of the day, unless for whatever reason you have to accelerate to close a gap, or you have to push through a big headwind or something like that. If you don't have to do that, you'll want to reserve your energies for when it counts, like this 2 minutes at 110% that we just did. So super job. Okay guys, so our last drill of the day. So we've ridden multiple times today at 90%. So now we're going to practice the feeling at 90%. So the first drill and the second drill, they're both 1.5 minutes. The first minute, I want you guys to focus on the screen to get to the power and the cadence targets. Okay? And then the last 30 seconds of each of the 1.5 minutes, I'm going to ask you guys to look away. So it's going to be a hidden segment. And the first one, we're going to do it at low cadence. So like 70 RPM or 75, somewhere around there. Sitting if you can. And the second one, we're going to do it at 100 RPM. So we're going to do the high cadence. And you guys will see which one do you have a better feel at. Do you have a better feel at the low cadence? Do you have a better feel at the high cadence? And then on the third one, it's 2 minutes at 90%. You have 1 minute to settle in at whatever cadence you want. I'd encourage you to go closer to the cadence that worked well in the first two exercises. So you might go lower on the RPM or higher on the RPM. And then you have a whole minute with you looking away from the screen. You want to imagine like you're at power watts, the gauge hides, and you guys got to go exclusively by feel, and then we'll see the results at the end. Okay, so we really want to internalize the feeling of a power like 90%. This is when you start to pass beyond that endurance power up into that threshold zone. Okay, so let's go to 90%, 70 on the RPM. If you learn the feel of this 90%, there's a good chance that when you guys ride outside, you'll avoid overdoing the power outputs because you'll know what 90% feels like, and you want to stay at 90% or below unless you really need to be pushing. Okay, so find that gear as close to 70 on the RPM as you can. Do it sitting. Okay, so find that sitting position. And now bring your attention to one of two things. Either the feeling of how fast your pedals are moving, or the feeling of the amount of pressure underneath each foot from one pedal stroke to the next. So some people prefer one, some people prefer the other. It doesn't matter. Think about one of those for the next 15 seconds. Internalize that feeling. It's called proprioception, okay, is the technical term. And in 10 seconds, I want you guys to look away from the screen and try to keep the cadence the exact same. Try to keep the power the exact same. So 3, 2, 1, and look away. And I'll tell you when to look back. So look away, close your eyes, stare at the ground, do something like that. And I'm going to tell you guys to look up maybe 3 seconds before the drill is over so you can take a look at what your average power and average cadence were. Okay? So focus on keeping things the same. There's a tendency to go too hard, to push too hard or pedal too fast when the screen is hidden. So let's see what happens to you. So keep going, guys. Keep going. Keep going. All right, now glance up at the screen to see how you did, and back it off. All right, so fantastic. So 1 minute recovery. Of course, when you guys are at power watts, we have all sorts of features to help you guys know how you did when the screens were hidden. Hopefully the program you're using at least tells you what your power output or what your average cadence was, so you have a good idea of how you did. So if you guys looked up and you saw that your cadence went up, for example, then you know that your power went up as well. Or you may have seen that your power went up, or your power may have dropped. So now we're going to try the same thing again, 90%, but this time at 100 RPM. So go a gear or two easier to get ready for it now. And you're going to want to use the same techniques. Internalize the feeling of how fast your legs are moving, or internalize the feeling of how hard you're pushing on the pedals. When you think about how fast your legs are spinning, that's a real cadence focus. When you think about how hard you're pushing, that's a real more focus on your force or power that you're putting into the pedals. Okay, so let's go. 90%, 100 on the RPM. Don't worry too much about this first minute. Just try to find those gears that get you to the 90%, 100 RPM. And then once you have that down, you can start glancing away from the screen right away if you want to practice. But you've got to bring their attention to something internal. You have to take it away from the screen, take it away from the power that you see. bring it to an internal sensation. So you got 25 more seconds to settle in, and just like before, I'll tell you guys when to look away, I'll tell you guys when to look back. So don't even think about looking at the screen. I'll tell you 3 seconds before the effort's over so that you can double check your power numbers before they reset on your screen. Okay, so we're going in 10 seconds. So really internalize that feel. It's a very interesting exercise here. So 3, 2, 1, and look away. Okay, now focus on the feeling of how fast your legs are spinning or how hard you're pushing. You can even listen to your bicycle. Does it feel like it's going faster all of a sudden? That means you're going too hard. Did the level of effort suddenly spike up? That means you're going too hard. Does it feel about the same? Oh, well then maybe you're kind of right where you need to be. So a couple more seconds like this, guys. All right, and now everyone look up. Check your power, check your cadence, and back it off. Fantastic. So was it easier for you at the low cadence, or was it easier for you at the high cadence? Maybe both of them were a disaster if you haven't practiced this recently, and that's okay too. But let's imagine, say you did better at the 70 RPM, then on the next one you choose whatever cadence you want. So think what your cadence comfort zone is. Say you did better at 70 and your cadence comfort zone is like 85 RPM. Choose something between 70 and 85. Let's say if you did better at the 100 RPM though, and your RPM comfort zone is 85, choose something between 85 and 100 RPM for this last one. So this last one, you have 1 minute to settle in at the cadence that you want, and then you have a whole minute with no feedback from the screen. So I really want you guys not to look at the screen and focus on using other senses like your proprioception, your feeling of the effort, or you can even listen to your bicycle. Okay, so let's go to 90%, whatever RPM you want. Listen to the spinning of the back wheel if you have a back wheel. If you're on a direct drive trainer, still listen to the sound of the flywheel spinning. Okay, that helps you internalize the sense of speed through your hearing. Okay, and then you'll be able to use something other than the visual cues on the screen for our last minute. Now the goal of this last minute, guys, is not to kill the watts. It's to get it bang on 90% or as close as you can get. Okay, so hopefully everyone's settled in. Think about the feeling of cadence. Think about the feeling of foot pressure. Have confidence in yourself that you're able to do this. A lot of people go over the power target because they're not confident and they end up going, they're worried they're going to go too low, so they go too hard. So have confidence in your feeling here, guys. Okay, so everyone, look away. Look away. So last chance to practice this today. And we have a whole minute. I'll tell you guys 3 seconds before it's done to take a look up. But until then, don't look up. Ask yourself how you're doing. Okay, does your bike sound the same? Does the pressure feel the same? Does the cadence feel the same? Are you all of a sudden breathing really heavy? If so, you got to back it off a little bit. Are you feeling nothing at all underneath your feet? Maybe you backed it off a little bit too much. So let's keep that focus, guys. So you have 20 seconds before you look up. Really focus. And then we'll find out how you did in just a moment. So keep going, guys. Nice and smooth. Working those proprioceptors. Internal feeling of effort. All right, and everyone take a look up. How'd you do? And back it off, so 2.5 minute recovery for just a short cool down here. So great exercise, guys. So this is a very valuable skill. At Power Watts, of course, our main training focus is on using power to optimize your training. But at the same time, we don't want you guys to become a slave to your power meter. We don't want you to become a slave to, your Garmin device or looking at your gauge on screen. We want you guys to develop the ability to internalize those efforts. So most of the time, you guys will be riding based on feeling, and the power output is informing you if your feeling is correct or incorrect, as opposed to you ignoring your feeling and just looking at the power output. So it's a really valuable exercise on any training that you do, whether it's a Power Watts home workout or it's any other type of workout. you could periodically look away at this from the screen and practice this skill at different powers and different cadences. The beauty of practicing it at 90% is that's when you guys transition from this endurance power that you can hold for very long periods of time into more of that threshold type of power, 95%, 100%, where the matches burn much quicker or the battery drains much quicker. So if you learn that feeling of 90%, and if you're riding outside, and if you don't have a power meter, or if you have a power meter but you don't want to just stare at the screen the whole time, you'll know, okay, I'm starting to go a little bit too high, I'm starting to burn some matches, or like, this is something I know I can sustain for an extended period of time while still getting as much speed as possible for my efforts, for example. So great session, guys. I hope you enjoyed our slightly different focus here, endurance focus. We worked different cadences, we worked some climbing, we worked the feel of the different efforts, so we tried to touch all the bases. And next workout is workout number 8 is going to be the Power Watts Pro Challenge, 10 times 30-second efforts at the highest power you can. So I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys for workout number 8. It's going to be a lot tougher than it was today, but it's really great because as a cyclist, you got to work that endurance and you got to work that high end. So your endurance is done, and next time I see you guys, we're going to be working the really high end anaerobic capacity work. So I'm very excited to see you, and thank you for joining in today.